Hi, so for my project, I decided to do it over the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which was written by Rebecca Skloot, and it was published in 2010. And it took Rebecca Skloot decades of research, and it stayed the New York bestseller and stayed there for 75 weeks. So this is a very powerful and popular book, and it was about an African American woman from Maryland who felt that she had a lump on her cervix, and so she decided to go visit John Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. Later, her cancer cells were harvested and used for scientific experimentation. This is when the first immortal cell line was discovered. The author wanted to further her knowledge and dive deeper into this investigation about Henrietta Lacks and her cells. And then she found that the Lacks family was very hesitant to open up to her because they had been betrayed by the scientific community and the media. And she knew she had to earn their trust before she could begin her investigation, which took her 10 years to do. So it was 1951 when Henrietta Lacks was 31 years old. She noticed the knot in her cervix. She then went to John Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, and was later diagnosed with cervical cancer, and then immediately started radiation and x-ray treatment. The doctors realized her form of cancer was very rare and unheard of, and since she was an African American woman, they were even more curious. So they were interested in testing her cells. One specific doctor named George Gay had been the head of the cultural department for many years. He had always been determined and curious to work towards getting cells to divide in order for the scientific community to have a constant supply of human cells used for research experiments. Unfortunately, Henrietta Lacks and her family were very unaware of the samples that he was using being made from her cells. The doctors and staff at Johns Hopkins did not tell the family that they were using her cells for scientific breakthrough. And then sadly, later that year, Henrietta Lacks passed away. So eventually, the science community named her cells the HeLa cells, which we are all aware of today, and it stands for Henrietta Lacks. And her family accidentally found out about this scientific usage of her cells. It was meant to be kept a secret and hidden in the scientific community, but the Lacks siblings ran into a researcher one day who accidentally spilt the information to them that part of Henrietta was still living and being used daily in these research labs. So once the word traveled, the staff at Johns Hopkins was trying to cover their tracks, and then they were reaching out to the Lacks family to pursue more research by using their blood work. Since the HeLa cells were immortal, doctors wanted and needed to test genetic makers, her siblings, part of her family, to see what is causing these cells to be immortal. And this immediately created a massive issue. Her family was not happy, like everyone else would be. The Lacks family thought that Henrietta was either still alive and they were keeping her hidden and living inside the lab, or that they were using a part of their deceased family member for profit that they were not benefiting from. And at this time, the Lacks family suffered from extreme poverty. They were African Americans in a time where it was hard. They didn't have much money. They didn't even have enough money to pay the medical bills or to see a doctor. So they were infuriated that non-family members were receiving tons and tons and tons of money with this science breakthrough, and they were not told anything about it. They were not receiving any compensation from it, and they honestly just felt so betrayed. This study later led to other African American men and women being drug off the street, being pulled from the street for scientific experiment. This was the time the scientific community didn't have much information about African American cells, and they were going crazy. They were doing tons of unethical research, unethical experiments, and basically treating the African American community like they were just used for science and testing. So this research still to this day is going on. It's been a 6-decade research study which has provided many scientific and health answers for the world that we live in today. It hasn't been official. However, it was extremely wrong of the Johns Hopkins Hospital for using Henrietta Lacks cells secretively, unethically, behind the family's back for money. This placed infuriating anger on an impoverished African American family while they had to watch their beloved Henrietta Lacks cells from her body being used for scientific research and study purposes only. They were not being told many answers or anything. And still to this day, this family is suffering from immense poverty. They are still fighting the battle of creating a law that something must be done for family members that have lost a loved one, and that loved one that has passed away, their body is still allowed to be tested and used. So this all started back in 1951, and it's still going on today. This is still a fight and a battle that the Lacks family is facing. This is something that, personally, with Henrietta, I have never experienced, and more for her family, which are the main characters of this book, that they are still fighting this battle after 6 decades, after 60 years. This is something that they are still fighting for and trying to find answers and seek a resolution. But there are no laws in the scientific community still, even though it's unethical. They technically have not done anything wrong. And that is just something that is hard for me to fathom. I would be infuriated. I would be so angry. And I would want the money being used for my mother in this situation. And I would want the answers. I would want this to stop. And so that is the main gist of the book. And it's a huge scientific breakthrough that people are still advocating for and fighting for to this day. And it was just an incredible book. And there's also a movie that I felt called to read and report back to you that this is a scientific issue in a way we can advocate for Henrietta Lacks, because it is wrong. They're misusing her cells, and they are taking advantage of an African American lady in an impoverished family. So that's it. Read Henrietta Lacks. Thanks.